So, welcome to Tech Chat number 36. I had a special guest on today named Cory Endrulat of the One Great Work Network. He's also got his own website, a couple of them. Nature is the answer. Literally, if you type in his name, Cory, Cory, and then just type in END in Google, he'll be the first one that pops up. He's got a lot of content that he's put out there. It was awesome talking to him today. He's talks about natural law and talks about ending slavery, and he talks about it in a way that's a little more palatable for those people who don't understand that we are still in a state of slavery. And this is his author page on Amazon. He's got several books. He's got a lot of work out there. If you're looking at this and you get a chance to go check out his author page on Amazon, go check it out. His books are for free, and he's putting information out there for free. And of course, you can buy them and support him. Cory, I bought one, but they're for free. I mean, this guy isn't in this for the money, which I don't think any of us are. But it was a pleasure talking to him today. And I talked to him mainly about this book right here, and this is Slavery Gone for Good. I really am looking forward to reading this. It was an awesome interview that I did today with him. I hope anyone watching this podcast can find this information helpful. This information we need to share. We need to put it out there. Cory was awesome talking to you today. I'm just going to be straight up. I don't want to make this a long beginning. I'm looking forward to maybe working on projects with you, interviewing more people. And, I've said this before to people in the freedom community. It's a bunch of awesome people that I wish I didn't have to know, because I could just be doing jujitsu, playing D&D, and reading Forgotten Realms books, which is what I kind of wanted to do when I was retired. But circumstances and synchronicities and different spiritual things I've had go on in my life, along with what's going on in the world, have led me to start talking about things. And you'd be surprised what happens when you put your intention into something and you actually have the courage to make contact with people. What could happen? So it was great talking to you today, Cory. If you see this, I'm sure you will. Everyone else, I hope you guys enjoy this. It's probably about 50 minutes of really good conversation about abolishing slavery, and in every form, not just the chattel slavery of the 1800s. So anytime, anyway, welcome to Tax Chat 36, everybody. This is Dan, your host. My website, soon to be website when I get it running, is going to be spiritualanarchist93.com. Right now, I don't have it up. I have a special guest today. He's interviewed me about a month ago. This is Cory Endrulat. I think
Hello.
I got it. Close.
Thank
got
you.
It right. Cory's with the One Great Work Network. I'm very happy to have him on. And he's going to talk to us today real quick. It's about a half hour. And kind of explain what his book's about on abolishing slavery. He is an abolitionist. So can you tell everybody what that is?
Yeah, so the book that you're referring to is this one in my background, Slavery Gone for Good. So this is a short book that I made, very short, for people who are completely new to a lot of information regarding what freedom is, the basic principles as to what ownership is, because ownership has a lot to do with freedom. If we were to look at anybody who's been enslaved, whether it's in the past or even to this day, the act of enslaving, we see that it's a claim of ownership over another individual. So really, slavery is a matter of ownership. And when you ask yourself, what is freedom? And you break it down, you say, well, freedom means I can do what I want. Well, do what you want. Where's the you unless you own yourself?
Right.
That's ownership. In order for a slave to free himself or herself, they have to recognize their ownership. So ownership is required for freedom. And honestly, also responsibility is required for ownership. So you can recognize that you own yourself. And then from that ownership, you recognize sovereignty, which means super reign, above rulership. It means you're above the ruler. You are the ruler of yourself. It's self-mastery, self-ownership. You achieved an understanding of who you are, your nature. And to say that, hey, I am free by nature, or I am free without any restraints or permissions of any other human being.
Right.
because what gives some human being that authority over my life? Do they have the right? Do they have the ownership over my life? Only I can actually own myself truthfully
Right.
and morally, because
Right.
only I can breathe for myself. So that's where our rights come from, is what is correct and what is moral. Equally so, because I cannot breathe for you and you
Right.
cannot breathe for me. So
Right.
it's based in truth, and just a basic understanding of ownership tells us of not just, like I said, rights, but freedom, sovereignty, and everything else. So that's why the book starts from the very first premise and it asks the question along the entire line. And you start to connect the dots and you
Right.
start to question everything. And that book tries to answer most of the questions that anybody would have. And then
Right.
people can also look more into the resources themselves, because the book also leads to a bunch of resources. And more than half of the book is quotes from former abolitionists, in case
Right.
people think I'm twisting the word abolitionism from the previous abolitionists, because that was a movement in the 19th century to end
Right.
slavery.
Well, and I like how you talked about the different forms of slavery. It's not just chattel slavery. It's not just the slavery. And when Europeans settled in this country to get away from what they considered to be an oppressive government, okay, the monarchy over there, I think the reason half of them were able to accept slaves in this country so easily is because they had slaves over there. This is not that the African slave trade wasn't the very first time slaves have ever existed throughout history. It seems to be part of the human condition, all the way going back to Sumeria.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's been slaves all along. But there was the other abolitionists who realized, no, this is wrong. We came here to get away from that. Why are we allowing this? So they ended up, you know, freeing the chattel slaves, right? But you talk about other slavery. You talk about financial slavery, spiritual
Mm-hmm.
slavery. Those are two big ones, and they use social engineering to change what all that means, to change words. They've used religion, I believe, to help control humanity. And it's a form of that's a form of slavery in itself. So it's
Mm.
like some of the stuff I've heard you talk about. It's to free ourselves from all these types of slavery, not just one kind, because they're
Yeah.
fooling us with all the slavery right now. They're tricking us. It's the same amount of slavery. We're just being tricked into different kinds now. It
Mm.
seems.
That's a good point, right? I mean, we had slavery for over 6,000 years, and to expect it to just vanish at once from the earth, I mean, we have to take a close look at it. And
Right.
why did the abolitionists want to get rid of slavery? What caused such a spark and a revolution for people to want that change to begin with? And yeah, there was a war and a bunch of things that a lot of people did not want. But what was the motive, the ambition that led to ultimately the action of slaves freeing themselves? Because that was considered a victory for a lot of people if they
Right.
were enslaved for many years. And you look at the people who have rights now, at least they have a lot more rights than they do back then,
Yes.
and that is a moral achievement in humanity. That's an evolutionary achievement, not
Right.
involution, but evolution. And when you mention different forms of slavery, I actually can deduce it down to only two forms within
Okay.
my book. So, there's a lot of people who talk about this form and that form, economic, prostitution, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
And I can basically deduct it and say it's basically two forms.
Right.
Some people want to say it's internal and external slavery. That's okay with me. That works. But also
Okay.
mental and physical, because I like to get a
Right.
little bit more specific. So mental slavery and physical slavery. Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, many writers and speakers of the past, many abolitionists have talked about mental slavery, even Bob Marley. I mean, a lot of people understood what this is. It's the belief that you do not deserve to be free.
Right.
So, notice I said belief, okay?
Right.
Because if you know yourself and you know where you belong, then you know that you aren't supposed to be a slave. Some people might want to be in their security, their
Right.
false sense of security, say, well, I want other people to be responsible for only something I can be responsible for. But that's not going to work out for them in the long run. If you give away your rights and you give away your ownership, you no longer are an ownership of yourself. You will be enslaved. You will be manipulated.
Right.
The slave master can whip you as much as he wants. He can do whatever he wants to
Right.
you, and you're giving him that power essentially. So mental slavery is very dangerous because it could be voluntary and it could be involuntary. And of course, slavery is particularly dangerous in the involuntary sense, because if you can enslave yourself and say, yeah, I want to be enslaved. But once you bring other people involved in that net, they're like, I don't want to be enslaved. How come you want everybody to be enslaved? I don't want everybody to be enslaved.
Right.
It causes an issue. We've been dragged into a net called government that
Right.
has really taken jurisdiction and claims ownership over all the land and all the businesses and all the people within that said land. They
Right.
came on the land and said, this is our land, and this
Yeah.
happens all over the world where this is our land, this is our territory. You follow our rules, or else you
Yeah.
go to jail, or else we throw you in a cage, or else we get to decide
But
how
they're
the
fined for
punishment
just trying to
works.
catch rainwater. That's how bad it is. I know somebody who did in the city that I'm in.
Mhm.
Um, I was talking with somebody. I'm not going to mention her name because she'll, or who she is even, because I want to remain physically safe. Um, but I was having this conversation with her, and I said, "Let me ask you a question," because she still votes and votes left, and I'm not a voter at all. So, like I've even said on my Facebook page, and you've seen some of my rants on Facebook, probably. If you vote, you're wrong. If you vote left, you're extra wrong. Is what I've said. But all of it's bad. But she votes left. So I said, if you and me were on an island, I use that island thing. Would I have a right to rule you, or would you have a right to rule me? And she's like, no, not if we were on an island. I'm like, then do you think does any human being have a right in creation to rule over another human being? Is any human being born with some magic abilities that some other human being isn't? And are they able to, can they rule over other humans? Is it moral? Can one human rule another? She couldn't answer it.
Right. They can't comprehend it.
They
And isn't
can't,
that interesting?
yeah, she
Because the
couldn't answer it.
slaves back then could not read or write. They did not know the answers to those questions. And that's why they were not free. And
Right,
once they knew those answers, they became free. So when
right,
you ask people these questions and they don't know how to answer, even though their basic understandings of freedom and slavery and rights and ownership, something
right,
that I would hope everyone should know because it's part of their nature. We say it's God given and it's inalienable. Well, if
right,
it's so universal and it's everybody has it and it's what's allowed all this prosperity, why not understand what that is? Otherwise, how do you expect to keep it? How do you expect to maintain it and actually allow freedom to manifest? Right? Because that's the thing. We're just allowing or choosing to not allow the good, the natural within our lives.
right,
We are ultimately the aggregators, the facilitators of what happens in this world by our actions, by our mindsets. So when we have mental slavery and believe that we're supposed to be enslaved or have somebody rule over us, as you say,
right,
or have other people in control of something only we can be in control of,
right,
then we create a scenario where we feel like it's natural or justified or moral for them to do so. But
right,
is it actually? And if just because you were born into it or just because you're used to it, does that also justify it as truthful or moral or natural?
yeah,
And so when you ask those questions and you truly have an understanding for yourself, detached from the system that you were born into and really take time to sit down with your own conscience, which you were
right,
given by your nature, then you will realize there's a natural authority, which is nature and yourself.
right,
And only you can be in control of yourself. So it's really, it should sound like common sense to a lot of people. To other people, it might take a little bit more time, and that's okay. But
yeah,
mental slavery is the belief that you should give away your rights or your responsibilities, your ownership over to others. And physical slavery is the result of that. And you don't want to be a physical slave. If you
no, and
want to
the
be,
more
then
you
look at the
give, the more
past.
you take.
I'm
They're
sorry,
not
what was
going to
that?
give it. They're not going to give it back. The more that you give, or the more you acquiesce, the more they're going to take.
Yeah.
And just like with the Roe versus Wade, uh, stuff that's going on. To me, it's all psyop. I look at this and it's like a puzzle. It's so easy for me to put together. I wish other people could see it as easily. Um, Obviously, I think anyone watching your show, anyone that's involved in the you know freedom community, the true freedom, they get it, but so many other people don't. It's like we have to define freedom. And I think that just talking about this, it's. I did this little morning coffee rant where I did the etymology of the word freedom. So it's cool to go from that rant, and like one of my next videos is talking to you about what true freedom is. Um, And part of what you're doing is getting people to understand what slavery is, because they don't even know they're enslaved.
Hmm.
And I mean, it can be very frustrating. Like I was on this page, I got invited to 4 women of Ohio against, the pro-choice women. Well, I of course joined it, but they didn't understand how pro-choice I was. I don't think I'm liked on that page very much right now. But because I told them to quit hating on all men. Think about this for a second. They want to control what you put in your body, what you do with your body, okay? What they want to put into your body, and then your ability to defend yourself. And I just said, is anyone else seeing a pattern here? Don't look at them as Republicans or Democrats. It's just look at them as government. Does anyone see a pattern here? Does it
Yeah.
matter? One side is getting their guns, the other side wants to take away, and they're doing this on purpose just to create that fight. Is what they're doing.
Hmm.
They want us to
Notice
fight.
the dividing line, like the part where they also come together and where they also divide is like one and the same. They're talking about rights of
Yes,
individuals, whether it's
yeah,
of the baby or the mother. They're
right,
both talking about that because of how important it is. So
right.
people know, they have a feeling like they know it's important to care for one another. They just are wrapped in confusion as to how to handle it, how to actionably take it into the world.
Yes, contradictions. I think we are raised with and raised into accepting way too many contradictions. And once we can get people to get rid of the contradictions in their belief systems, that's where all outer deception and inward self-deception will go away once you do away with the contradictions. I don't think there can be any contradictions in truth. There just can't.
Right.
So that's the problem. That they're willing to accept contradictions.
Well, division lives in contradiction. And if people want a division, people who have agendas want division among the people who are used for those agendas,
Right.
then it will be easy to kind of create that dichotomy. It's like, oh, pro life or pro choice. Just think about the words at use, regardless of the issue. And notice that it's set up as a trap in the very first place.
Yes, I watched one of your shows on that, and I might have actually linked it on one of my podcasts or on my Facebook page or both, because I loved how you tore it down. Yeah, we all need to be pro-choice because it's our right? But we're also pro-life.
Yeah, so nobody ever talks about both, and
Yeah,
nobody really looks at just the word terminology. And the reason why that's so important is because that's why people are getting tricked into this matter. The words that are used, such as like even after 9/11, they would pass something called the Liberty Act and the Patriot Act, all these things to make it
yeah,
sound nice.
uh-huh,
It really tricks people into thinking certain things, and people do fall for those words, and those words do have an impact in more ways than we think.
right,
So, it's something that to just pay attention to, more consciousness, of course, which never
right,
hurts, and that allows the mental slave to realize what's happening in their condition. Like, oh wait, there's other people who are free, I'm not free. Like, what does that mean? Oh, I can be free. What does that look like? And it's scary for a lot of people if they are enslaved in any way at all,
right,
and they're achieving more freedom. They're scared of it because they don't know what it looks like, or they've never lived it before.
right,
So that's sort of natural, you can say, to happen, to occur, but it's not natural for their condition to feel this sort of like guilt or insecurity with embracing the natural reality.
right,
So, so just because something is natural to occur does not mean it's natural to exist, or just because something is natural to exist does not mean it's natural to use. People have to learn from their environments, and people are not stupid, I don't think,
no,
but of course, if you shun out knowledge and you want to remain ignorant, then you're sort of asking to be stupid,
right.
and that's on your own fruition. And hey, you're still going to learn at the end of the day. I don't have to convince you,
One way or the other,
but
the hard way or the easy way, and
right.
you know what? I think a lot of people are picking the hard way.
Physical
They play with
slavery.
words. They play with words. They play with the meaning of words. So I've been guilty in the past of wanting to speak as plainly as possible, and I use colloquial terminology. So I did a little experiment when I did the etymology of the word freedom. It was only like a 10-minute video. I talked about a lot of things. I let my daughter listen to it, who's like 5 months away from being 18 years old. She's a young adult. I wanted to get her take on it. The very first thing she said to me was, I loved the etymology of the word, that you did the etymology of the word freedom. So that actually does mean something. And I really didn't understand that until I got to hear a young person tell me that they dug that. So that's great. There's hope, because if people want that, there's this new show coming out about anarchy on, is it on HBO or is it Netflix? HBO or Netflix? It's coming out. I've seen it. That tries to explain what real anarchism is. People are getting fed up with our two-party system.
Yeah.
More and more people are going towards the center, and they're realizing that is, anarchism. And I think if we also get people to realize that the problem in our world is slavery problem, and to be an abolitionist and to
Yes.
abolish the problem,
Way more important.
I think if the problem is abolished, which is what I dig in your message, then the natural result will be one of a state of anarchism. So I
Yes.
think I really dig the whole, that whole thing. That's why, I hope your book goes big, hope it gets out there, goes big.
Well, I made it simple for the purpose of teachers and students, like I said. And as for my second book that goes more over the philosophy of natures, I mean, that's a whole nother perspective that I don't see being really talked about. And I'm making a course curriculum about that and stuff. There's different ways that people can learn, and I'm keeping that into consideration. And I encourage people reach out if they're interested or they have any questions.
Right.
I encourage people look into all the many different documentaries I produced, or even printable resources, and really just sit down with themselves and ask for themselves, because I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. Like I said, I'm just a facilitator, an
Right.
aggregator of what is already here. I believe that the answers have already been here with humanity, and we've just been keeping ourselves away from it. Or we've been distracting ourselves, remaining ignorant of it. So that is understanding, that nature, that's what it means, is something that has always existed, something that
Right.
we need to learn from. So, but without that learning part of it, the nature means nothing, like without our human nature
Right.
aligning to nature, then there's no good in nature, because we can't align to it. We need to use our nature for it. Otherwise, we will
Let
lose
me,
all of nature.
because you're talking about that, which I'm heavily into nature, and I even put in my book Rise from Darkness some of the animal spirit, really spirit guides. I wouldn't say animal totems, that's something totally different, but some of the animal spirit guides that I had, some synchronicities and things I was trying to understand, still trying to understand. And that's when I realized science is nothing but a word that describes a process, and nature is truth. So there could very well be a science to what, and maybe it's on a quantum level. Don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll keep researching. But maybe there's a science to what I experienced that I call supernatural, or thought of as supernatural. And it's really simply natural. And I just haven't discovered the science behind it yet. But once I
Right.
do, that's all science is trying to discover what is truthful and inherent in nature. So I think I might have put that in my book, or it might be going to my next book. But it's funny that you touch on that, because it's almost exactly what you're saying. Like,
But
I'm really
isn't it interesting to say supernatural, not super unnatural? If we're saying
well,
it's not,
like
if
I
it's
still
not
call
based
it
in reality.
supernatural. I call it simply natural. You get to a point where it's not supernatural, simply natural once you
Mm,
understand it. So
yes.
I still haven't really gotten to a full understanding. If I would have waited till I completely understood everything, no, I wouldn't even be doing podcasts.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the world's on fire, so I can't keep my mouth shut. I need to at least do that, because again, we talked about what has ended slavery in the past. It's usually two things. The abolitionists had a level of empathy for their fellow human beings,
Mhm.
and then those who were enslaved got angry.
Yeah.
Usually, it takes anger to create some type of action,
Right.
and I think it's a combination of empathy and righteous anger, not frivolous anger. I
Mhm.
have frivolous anger almost every day. I'm working on it. I'll meditate. I'm working on it. We're all human,
Right.
but I'm talking about when you really have a right to be mad.
Yeah.
And I had to explain to my wife and my daughters, don't be scared if I raise my voice. I'm not going to yell for no reason, but if I'm pissed about something, maybe I have an emotional reason. Men are, have emotional reasons, and sometimes we raise our voice. It can scare women, but you guys are being socially engineered. And it's telling me it's running out of time, but I think it'll keep going. Um, they're being socially engineered to not want us men to have any type of normal divine masculinity. and the wolves that are at the gate are going to be toxically masculine.
Mhm.
So it's like the women right now need to understand, we need tougher women too. There needs to be more of that yin and yang balance that's found in nature.
Yeah,
Um,
so to sort of tie into these ideas that we've talked about, when you're physically enslaved, that's the peak of a man-made authority, because now
right,
somebody is in control of you. So mental slavery gives way to that. So that's the root. You need to
right,
understand the roots so not to get to that symptom condition.
right,
So you have, the mental condition leads to the physical condition. And that's true across all scales as well. What you think is what becomes, and then what you act is also, with other people who act the same way, what the physical reality becomes.
right,
That's causation to effects.
right,
So looking at, all those natures, that's the knowledge of nature. That's understanding what belongs, what's intended,
right,
etc. Anytime we ask questions along the lines of, is this meant for human beings? Are humans beings meant to be enslaved? We're essentially asking, is this their natural condition? So it's only natural to mention what is natural in
right,
light of that, in light of what is moral, because
right,
those two have to really coincide. And I've been trying to make that point a little bit more clear, especially in our communities, to sort of integrate these ideas, because you can't leave out one and the other. And the problem I see with a lot of anarchists, people who call themselves anarchists, is they stray away from the moral issue. Like you said, they're not focusing on slavery or realizing that's what it is. And
right,
so they go into economic debates and all these other things, which could tie into slavery. Like I said, those are other forms. But
right.
is it hitting at the root? Is it defining what slavery is? Is it
Exactly.
defining what freedom is to begin
They
with?
don't
Because
want to
once
say
you
it's
get that
protecting
clear,
morals, right? They
you
don't want
have
to
the
say
roots.
morals. What's that? I'm sorry.
Well, once you define those concepts, you get the roots clear. So
Right.
that way, all the other things, all the other forms are made clear as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen one. I've seen a couple different talks. I've seen one you did, and you handled it very well. Um, but some people don't want to actually acquiesce or actually admit that morals are objective. They don't think reality is objective, and
Mm.
they have some solipsist views. How can you know anything else exists? I heard this from an anarcho-capitalist I was talking to, who is otherwise pretty spiritual and conscious, doesn't believe that morals are objective. So I had to just explain what objective morality is, and what is the actual right and what is actually wrong. And people, and it's simple. I know there's nuances, but it's pretty simple. Don't take any action you take, right? That doesn't harm somebody is a right. If you're harming somebody or coercing somebody or allowing the harm of somebody, even is, I think, at this point with what's going on in the world, if you know better, you should be speaking out, because then you're kind of complicit with the enslavement of the rest of humanity, which I don't know. Like, you're maybe not directly doing it, but that would be one of the finer nuances, right?
Yeah, I
That
look at it as natural morality, not objective, because it caused just that word alone. Again, the power of words will cause confusion, and I think it's
okay,
a
okay,
it's a problematic term, actually, in my view, for many reasons. But I think natural morality is more important, because if people use their conscience or their empathy and their individual conscience, and they're not giving that away, then by definition, statism cannot exist, because statism is this mental slavery. That is the belief that you can give away your conscience and have other people make those decisions for you on your conscience of what is right and wrong. They make the decision of what is right and wrong. That's legality. But
right.
legality is not morality. So if people just understand that, there's no need to really talk about, is it
Yeah,
objective?
you
Is
don't
it
have to
this or
get
that?
into that
Because
ego,
if
that
the
kind of ego.
um,
That you said the word objective, sometimes that would create an ego contest with somebody who thinks a little differently. The way you're putting it is a softer way for them to understand it. I think it's a
yeah, it's like you got to try to find the common ground within people, and most people have a conscience, or they understand what it means.
right,
So that is the important thing there. Like, what is empathy? Why do we have it? Why is it that we think psychopaths are psychopaths? Why do we think they're evil? Now, again, look at ownership, regardless of right and wrong. That will lead you to all the other answers. Look at statism, regardless of right and wrong. It'll lead you to all the other answers. Slavery. Why did we abolish it? There's no point if there's no moral goal or purpose within the universe.
right,
So all those lead to some sort of objective or natural source of morality only naturally because you seek a natural authority. So just
Right.
replace the word objective with natural and morality with authority, and that's objective morality, and makes it way easier for people to understand. Because when
Right.
you're saying moral relativism is the problem, what you're saying is that man imposing his will on others is the problem, that man should not be the source of morality.
Right.
But if you're saying objective morality is the solution, what you should be saying, which is what essentially a lot of people are saying when they use that term, is you're seeking a natural authority. You're seeking morals coming from nature or from our knowledge, our experiences, not just from purely beliefs or man-made impositions or just
Right.
wills. So those beliefs can be formed through knowledge, but the knowledge is ultimately what guides them. The
Mhm.
knowledge is what leads to a direction, a path. And without that knowledge, the beliefs are all over the place, confused. And when you don't know what nature is, you don't know who you are
Right.
yourself. How could you say you know really anything? So the truth, if you acknowledge there's anything called the truth, it would have to be something that is fixed or something that we can understand, a blueprint within
Inherent
the
in
universe.
creation, right? Inherent in creation,
Otherwise,
natural.
there's no such thing as truth.
Right.
So it's really important that we make these distinctions sometimes in just terminology, just to help people. Because if you get stuck in certain ways of looking at things without the perspective, then yeah, you're going to get into conversations that will go off guard. And I
Yeah.
think appealing to people's current understanding of slavery, which they get a little bit from the school system, is
Right.
okay because they kind of understand, yeah, it's ownership over another individual. Now apply that to the modern day. Apply that to all the different ways of slavery. Not
Right.
just chattel slavery. Chattel slavery is just one form.
Right.
What about political slavery? The most prevalent one today, because everybody's talking about politics. Everybody's like fighting over whose side is better,
Right.
whose will should be imposed. And Josiah Warren, Henry Clark Wright, these guys are saying that slavery. These are abolitionists.
Right.
They're saying that slavery is the subjugation of one will over another. So it's it's just that simple. If you are imposing your will on another and threatening by violence to do something against someone's will that they don't want done unto them, that's slavery. And if you think that that somebody else is in ownership of your own property, then that's voluntary slavery. But
Right.
don't bring other people into that net, even if you can manage that in a private scenario. Don't say, well, you deserve to be enslaved too, and you deserve to be enslaved, and telling
Right.
other people then how to live their life, because then that's involuntary.
Right.
So voluntarism is not even a good term either, because it doesn't consider slavery. Anarchism is not a good term either, because it's not looking at morality or slavery itself. It could be, but
Right.
most of the time it's used, it's not. It's looked at as chaotic. So abolitionism is the only thing that focuses on the root, and it's not an ideology, it's an action. Get rid of what
That's
doesn't
that's it.
belong.
It's an action. Yeah. Verb.
So when
Yeah.
we talk about nature and what is natural, well, it goes coinciding with this. If man has created this institution called slavery, if man has enslaved fellow man, that's a man-made authority. You can get rid of that. If man has created it, man can get rid of it, right?
Right.
But we can't get rid of something within nature because nature came before us. Nature has
Right.
always existed. Nature created us. We
Right.
can't get rid of nature. Nature can get rid of us, actually, if
Yeah.
if we cannot align to nature.
Right.
So nature can abolish us. Nature will
Right.
have its own abolitionism, but our abolitionism is to abolish that of which we created, which doesn't coexist with nature.
And I think educating people on this is the first start, like what you're doing, like what a lot of people are trying to do in their own way, within the freedom community. But I really dig what you're getting at. Really dig how you're putting across. It immediately pulled me in because it gets at the very root of the problem. And I've been saying slavery for like the last 2 years. Um, you know, and I think religion is a form of enslavement and contradiction. And I think politics is another form of religion. Um, what would be the steps you think of actually getting rid of slavery? It's like a big order, is it not? So fact chat number 37. Whenever I decided to do an actual official fact chat, not just like some coffee rant. Uh, Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed. The question I asked is, okay, once we understand what slavery is and what freedom is, How do we unenslave ourselves?
Okay.
It's a big, tall order.
So the first step in really abolishing slavery uh, is honestly making sure and still ensuring, no matter what, that people also understand what slavery is.
Right,
The learning process never ends.
right,
So you pass it down to your children, they pass it down to their children through the generations, or else slavery will just happen again because the knowledge was not in manifestation. They can see this is what human beings can do to other human beings when they're left unconscious. You
right,
don't want a human species that is lazy and cannot think for themselves, because then, by definition, if they can't think for themselves, they're not going to be free. So again, that ownership is so important, and you can do that at a young age when teaching simple principles like, "Hey, this toy is yours. Oh, okay, be nice. Don't and explain why. Don't just say to do it. Explain to the
right,
kid, well, why is it nice? Because of this and because of that, and um, because of how the world manifests. If everybody is nice and if there's certain order, what is order? It means people are working together, they're cooperating, they're creating voluntary interactions. Really
right,
simple, basic principles of freedom that needs to always be taught and understood by parents and children alike. So that will always persist. And that is going to tie into the first and last step here. There's four steps in particular.
okay,
First step here, when it comes to our current day and age, and this goes for any day and age, if they want to make a message loud and they want to say, hey, slavery is happening, we want to let everybody know, they first have to make their awareness. They need to create awareness presence first before the education even manifests. Okay,
right,
so after they have an understanding for themselves or for their kids or whatever, what slavery is, they're going to want to show it to the rest of the world. So this is step
right,
one, representation. It can be a flag, it can be a material of some kind, it can be a certain form of knowledge, a website, something that a lot of people share in particular, because that will create a movement around an idea. Movements are created by ideas, and
right,
movements have created every revolution in history, every awakening, every big change, because people got together and stood grounded on what it is that needs to be focused on. A lot
right,
of people want to look at this or that, but abolitionism for slavery is looking at a really big root to all the problems that we see, honestly, in our world today.
right,
If you believe in something that's immoral, if you believe that certain people are exempt from morality, that is, in the case of authority, statism, mental slavery, that certain people can take wrong actions because they're authorities, and other people, they're not authorities, so they're bad, they're criminals.
exactly.
You're perceiving of two different people of the same action as as one saying criminal, one's not, even though they're both partaking the same action. It's hypocritical.
Yes,
So when you can say, well, no human being should enslave another. It doesn't matter if you're a master or this or that. It doesn't matter. President, minister, all these other terms. The
right,
act of slavery remains the same. If you can understand what that is, then that's a groundwork. That's a framework you can work with. All of independent media, all the people who create independent media to begin with, because the mainstream media is censoring them,
right,
recognize that freedom is the goal. So if they can just unite on slavery, recognizing slavery, which is recognizing freedom, then that is the groundwork. That is what you can represent upon. That's the movement. And
right,
then from representation, you have step two, which is education. That will naturally happen. These are natural steps to change.
right,
The reason why is because the material leads them somewhere. Otherwise, it's not very useful material. If you're
right,
out in the street protesting and you're like, man, this is so important. I need to let the whole world know. Well, you can have a sign that just says, get angry now, or we need our freedoms now. It's not going to lead anywhere. It's not going to lead anyone anywhere. Anybody who sees this on media or on the streets, they're not going to have a conversation with you. They're not going to look at a website and be like, okay, I'll learn more. They're not going to do
right,
anything. You're just yelling, and if anything, you might be inciting something. You might be doing something where you don't really have to protest is not a required
I'll
action
never
here,
be at one of those things.
because it's not educating people and
No,
it's not sharing the ideas. It could be really as simple as having a yard sign, like people do for political elections, but instead one that's universal and eternal and timeless, that shares knowledge, natural knowledge of the world around us. So that is more impactful and it will always last compared to the political campaigns. That is a sign of representation and that will do its own work. Somebody who looks at it and says, oh, well, that's really interesting, will look at it for themselves. You will be attracting like minds.
Yes.
Okay. Now there's a lot of people who are going to look past it and say, nah, I'm not going to look into that. Oh, what is that? That's weird. And they forget about it within seconds. But that's because it doesn't speak to them. They're not there yet in their consciousness. That's
Right.
why you need different types of signs and different types of people doing different types of representation. You are the movement. If you care about freedom and you are the one that has to create it, you have to add your own creativity into it. You have to be the one that's courageous
Right.
to manifest it for the whole world and share with others and say, yeah, a movement is essential because a lot of people don't think it is. And a lot of us are outcasts and we don't want to be part of any system or any group or any club. But
Yeah.
we need to have some sort of organization to achieve things, whether it's a network online, like the One Great Work Network,
Right.
or just a social forum where people can get together, or like this, where we're collaborating and doing video content. These are all forms of networking, which are so essential. So that is during the process of representation and step two, which is education. You need to bring people together. And
Right.
once you have the knowledge and the people together who have that knowledge, that is a powerful combination. Because let's say you have one town that all understands this, a very close community. Maybe they all built next to each other on purpose. Maybe they all live next to each other. They had these plans. They grew community gardens, what have you.
Right.
Um, and that's not the action step that needs to be done, but it helps in the process for freedom.
Right.
If these people are together and they share these ideas, they can then say, you know what? We're here. We have enough people. We can stand our ground. We don't
Right.
need to participate in the system anymore. We've done what we've had to do, which was educate enough people to understand it. Now we have the numbers. And once you have the numbers and you look at these elites that have barely any numbers compared to us, millions of people,
Right.
you can stand your ground and say, hey, that what I'm doing is I'm just defending who I am. I'm not going out there, going up to the state and saying, I'm taking down the state. I'm going to burn it down. I'm going to
Yeah.
bring up my arms. No,
Replace
it's
it
not.
with another one.
Yeah,
Is what it
yeah,
is.
let's not do anything like
Yeah.
that. We're not on the offensive. You're on the defensive because
Right.
you're just defending who you are. This is the slave saying, I'm not going to be a slave anymore. I'm going to either one, run away, or if I have to, defeat my slave master because he won't let me run away. Because one way or another, you want to run away because you want to be free. So
Right.
you want to defend yourself. And if that means other people are going to try to stop you from defending yourself, well, then you're not defending yourself if they're stopping you. You have to defend yourself. You have to stop them from their violent aggression
Right.
with force for
Right.
self-defense. And that's the self-defense principle, and I am also a fan of not really using much aggression, not using much violence, even in the means for self-defense. But there's going to be times and places for it being of necessary need. And Gandhi managed to do his revolution with no arms,
Right.
non-resistance. I am perfectly cool with that. But it
Right.
depends on the time and setting. If you are sitting at your own property, your house, and you're not doing anything wrong, and you're just a peaceful person, and you got a whole community with you, and you're like, we're not going to pay taxes, and the government comes in with their little pawns of soldiers, their slaves, their willing slaves, their mental
Yeah.
slaves, and they're like, well, hey, if you don't pay these taxes, you're gonna have to get out of here. And you're like, I'm not just gonna bow down to them, otherwise I lose everything. I want to fight with dignity. This is what I stand for.
Right.
Now maybe you want to bow down, but then how are people going to see? How are people going to see what you've done? You haven't done anything. All you've done is surrender to the state. An
Yeah.
act of sacrifice is required to show that, like, hey, what we're doing is meaningful. So that community needs to stand their ground, and then to see that their government, their own government of their own people, is
Right.
attacking their own people
Right.
to make them coerced into doing what they want. That's hypocritical on the system of the government. They would
That'll be
expose
something we'll never
themselves.
show on the mainstream news media. I think back to
but
Waco.
it but it would make a big demonstration. It
It
would
would.
say to
It
everyone, like,
absolutely would.
it would show how corrupt the government is to invade their own people, so-called supposed people,
Right.
and use their own people against them as well.
We're gonna protect you so much that we're gonna kill you if you don't want our protection. That's
Yeah.
almost like what there's the contradiction. And thinking back on it, I had just gotten on the Marine Corps when Waco happened. And of course I was still way brainwashed. I'm like, wow, these people living on that ranch, what's their problem? They more than likely, I don't know for sure, I wasn't there, were just a group of people that wanted to get out of the system, and they weren't bothering anybody. They were armed to defend themselves and use the self-defense principle if needed. The more I've learned about government, the less and less I doubt that Waco was anything that the mainstream news media said it was. These people probably, David Koresh probably was not the cult leader they tried to make him out to be. They say that about anybody who has any
Yeah.
type of leadership
Well,
at all,
the
any
problem
kind
is,
of capacity that people want to, hey, we did what this guy's saying, we're going to follow what this guy's doing because we like his message. He might not even have looked at himself as a ruler of any kind. He
right.
was an organizer, possibly, right?
Yeah.
I don't know,
It could be
but
all voluntary and everybody
right,
was just there because they liked the message. For sure. We don't really know what happened. And that's why there's so much mystery and, different talks about it. But you see that like that is an interesting scenario because if you have one extreme, you can create another extreme. And that can't happen. Like you can't have some crazy people coming out of the woodworks that believe that they're like the second coming of Christ or whatever, because they have knowledge that will free people.
right,
And just even though that knowledge is really essential, the image and the identity they attach to it is a problem
right,
that will then actually help like get rid of the message, what they're trying to achieve. So
right.
like we got to be careful of extremes falling into that ourselves.
Yes.
Just because the message is right, just because the knowledge is right, does not mean we should turn into something that we that
It's
becomes
about the
so.
message. It's not about no one individual. It's not about
Yeah,
us, and
we got to
that's
be
one of the
careful
reasons
of
why
that.
it took me a while to speak up. I wanted to make sure, hey, I want to make sure my ego's out of this. I want to make sure I'm doing it for all the right reasons, not just to,
That's
get
why
back.
if we had a movement, it wouldn't be about one person.
No,
There would be
at all.
people who speak up, who do a good job at speaking,
Right,
but it's not based or like really dependent on one or two people, like it is for Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., where they can just kill them and the whole movement's dead for the next generation. Like that shouldn't happen. If the
right,
knowledge of what they stood for matters, then that should live on.
right.
But that's because they never pass the throne or say like, hey, you're the movement, not me, like you are the movement.
Yes, 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 yes,
So
yes.
that's why I stress that. And so this could be done at any time period. It could be way after my time where we do these four steps. One is representation, two is education, three is defend, which is where the town is like, I'm not going to put up with this. And then number four is honestly just generational sustainability. It's honestly just having that in circulation. Show, that's what I call it. It's step four is show. So
Pass
step
it
one
on.
is defend, two is educate, three is defend, um, and four is show. So represent, educate, defend, and show. If you can show your defense, show why you're doing what you're doing, then the media
Right,
picks up on it. Everybody sees it. They see a website in the corner of the flag. They see, a website on the material. They see what you're putting out there. Then they see why you're doing what you're doing. It's going to cause a ripple effect. And they'll see why the government is so hypocritical of going against their own people,
right.
thinking that they're slaves. And these people are like, we're not slaves. That's the whole reason why we're free. And we're just going to live our lives.
And that's the key, getting into mainstream news media. And I think eventually one of them is going to, they're not stupid. Like not all these people that are, Project Mockingbird, they're all falling in line with the psyop. There's people in all these organizations I know that know better. At what point are they going to actually speak out and give anybody that give this movement that wants freedom uh, a piece of real limelight in the mainstream news media to
Yeah.
get into the public consciousness in some way? Because right now, all they got the public consciousness. Like I'm not fearful. I'm pretty much, no, we could say fearful. I've been afraid my whole life. I've just done what I needed to do in spite of the fear. I think step three is coming quickly with what they got going on. Like I really feel like step three is going to be upon us and we don't even want it. We're not going to even get through step one or two in
Yeah,
time for
and that
step
will be a
three.
problem because if you don't have step one and two and you have just step three, even though it sounds good, like people are defending themselves, if
Yeah,
they don't show why they're doing that, they don't educate people as to why they're doing that, then they'll just their narrative of these are some extremists who are
yeah,
attacking America, who are this
right.
or that, will actually seem more legitimate to people and they can
Yeah.
sell it better. But when you have a flag or some material and you say, this is what I'm a part of, and you encourage other people to do something of that sort, then you're creating something that's way bigger than just one person taking an action or
Yes.
one person doing something for their own interest. Like, no, this is a human effort. This is a human purpose.
Right.
So a movement has to represent those universal and timeless ideas. And there's a lot of movements that aren't universal, that aren't timeless. So
If you do this, then what's going to end up happening is the violence could be avoided, or future violence could be avoided. I think
exactly.
that they're shooting for more immediate violence. That's going to, once it starts, it's people are going to be broken into sides. Is what's going to end up happening.
And remember,
And
they is just people.
yeah,
So remember that. If they
yeah,
use their own pawns, they're just people who are also enslaved. Doesn't
right.
mean they can't be woken up as well, though. Like,
We
don't
have
leave
to.
that out of that. I
I
don't
was
want
a
it to.
word follower. I woke up.
If you
We
make
can
this
wake
an
them
us
up.
versus them,
Right.
you might create that alienation. So
Yeah.
if you say like, oh, look at this government, like, no, they're just people.
Yeah.
If you start acting like that, then it's going to actually make it more legitimate.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful again with the terminology.
I said something on a senator's page, a senator's Facebook page the other day. Um, and I think I cut straight to the point. I was like, listen, none of us are believing this bullshit psyop anymore, but I really do hope you heal and get better. So the message, you could take that any way you want on heal and get better. Because she was talking about having COVID and she was sick, and
Yeah.
so of course I meant I hope you heal and get better in the physical sense, but I really was meaning I hope you heal and get better in the emotional and or mental or spiritual sense, because I think they are spiritually bankrupt to be intelligent enough to know better, but are going along with it,
Mhm.
following in line with it. I don't think anyone. Um, well, no, some people really are afraid. I get it, but I had to tell her no one's believing the psyop anymore. Sorry. But then I backed it up with, but I hope you get better. I hope you heal and get better. So hopefully that's type of message isn't going to be taken the wrong way. Like, we'll see if I get
You
anyone
need
knocking.
confidence for the courage.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean ego, it just means confidence.
right,
People might confuse the two. But yeah, just because you're confident does not mean you have an ego.
right,
Um, just because you believe something to be true and you know so does
right,
not mean that it's just your personal belief. Oh, it's just your opinion. Oh, it's just your ego and you're going on some sort of trip or you change to know maybe you actually understand something. So it's a learning curve for humanity. I see a lot of good things rising up out of the woodworks. But I'm not going to sit back and say, well, yeah, it's all good. Like, and I'm not like I don't think ever the work is finished ever. So I just want to put that out there. Like you can't I can't say it's done ever. There's always something to be done. But if humanity could do one thing, yes, it is to have a movement and end slavery. That will fix most of everything. Technology being an issue in the future, technocracy, not an
right.
issue. If you don't have a centralized authority with all the technology in their tool belt, and while
Right.
all the technology for us is like minuscule, it's not it's not going to work out. If you get rid of that authority before technocracy, then technology can be further used for freedom, creativity, innovation.
Yeah, I've had you like a lot longer than I wanted to have you. I hope I'm not taking. I could have a really long conversation with you, man. But what you put out here today, I hope anyone watching my show understands this. Um, and if somebody like you, who to me, I'm good at reading people, comes across as a pretty peaceful, intelligent human being, does start using force, things have probably gotten pretty bad.
Yes.
That's just my opinion, and that's good because that's kind of how I am. I'm not a bully, never have been a bully. I've always was the one usually. I was like the nerd who got bullied on accidentally, and then they'd find out accidentally that I could fight. I'm
Mhm.
not a bully. I've never liked to start fights in my entire life, but I also probably come across a lot more egotistical than you do. You come across like you really got it under wraps, which is you got a calming effect. Like I just feel it over, over the computer, just online. So to say it's to not have online events, like I've been saying before, I want to get together in person. I can see I can feel that you got a very calming aura to you. People are going to dig your message,
Mhm.
and the way you put it out there. Because I think a lot of times I get angry, and I know if I get mad, you, even if you're right for being mad, all of a sudden you're wrong because you got mad. So they're going to judge your reaction worse than what caused the reaction is usually what happens. And it's not right, but it's what happens.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I just want to thank you. And do you want to plug any of your? I could write them all down, in the comments. But if you want to plug any websites or anything you got,
Yeah. So all my work is just Cory Nature's the answer. That's it. Just look up Cory Nature's the answer. You'll find all my stuff. Taplink.cc/Cory Health. So that's
right?
taplink.cc/Cory Health. You'll see all my links. But the movement is separate from me because you are the movement. NITA.one. So that
Gotcha.
stands for Nature is the answer.one. So NITA.one. And you'll see there's a learn button, an action button. It's the movement blueprint that I created, but of course it's not solely based on that movement. You don't have to use just that movement. I'm working with a lot of other movements, common law assemblies, and a lot of other people who are doing great work.
Right.
So it's about bringing people together from all sorts of different backgrounds, but we have to talk about action. We have to talk about this knowledge,
Yeah. Just
both.
next step. What's the next step? And I, get together in intentional communities is probably something that a lot of freedom loving people are going to have to do because we need numbers. We need to have that strength in numbers because no man's an island.
Yeah. There may have been a lot of people who listened who were just like still trying to grasp the knowledge. And then there
right.
might be some people listening who are just trying to grasp the action. It's two separate topics, two separate ball games. I just want to make that clear. Like it's not something that you're supposed to understand immediately, either one. They're
Right.
both like of their own league. I don't see action talked about in independent media that much for that reason. Also for
Right.
the fact that they like to look at what rises to the surface. So I would love to reach out to David Icke as well and share that with him because I think for so long independent media has done great work, but it will not matter unless they do the required action that is necessary to free humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And thanks for being on the show, and thank you for interviewing and giving me a platform on the
Mhm.
great online events that you're going to have going on. That's how I met you. Thank you for hitting me up, and everyone watching, man. Just to try to keep a good attitude, try to live in the moment, have a little fun every day. I always say put some love up there because they can't do nothing with love. They can't feed on that. It's useless to
Right.
them. So with that, thank you for being on the show, Cory.
Stand and fight. Live by your heart. Always one more try. I'm not afraid to die. Stand and fight. Say what you feel. Born with a heart of steel. Burn the bridge behind you. Leave no retreat. There's only one way home. Those who laugh and crowd the path and cut each other's